So welcome, I'll say it again, this is day 4 of the Embodied Social Justice Summit, and I'm the host of this session, Corinne Bell, and we're here with our presenter for the day, Kai Cheng Thom. Kai Cheng, I'm so excited to have you with us. I'm just gonna read your bio quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. Okay, so Kai Cheng is a writer, performer, somatic healer, and body worker based in Toronto. Sorry, can you pronounce the name here?
Yeah, it's Toronto or Toronto.
Thank you for that. Beautiful. Toronto. That's what I was looking at. Thank you. Toronto, colonially known as Toronto, Canada. She's published and spoken widely on trauma and transformative justice. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to see you.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Corinne. Welcome to everybody here. I am beaming myself to you today from, as Corinne mentioned, Toronto or Toronto, originally known as the dish with one spoon wampum territory. The dish with one spoon indicates that the land is a dish that we share, and the single spoon that we are meant to act in collaboration to steward and care for the land and each other. Specifically a spoon, not a knife, because as I've received this story, it's not about cutting. This land was originally stewarded by the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Anishinaabe. Of the Anishinaabe, particularly the Mississaugas of the Credit. Although over the centuries, the dish with one spoon has also been inhabited by many other indigenous peoples, as well as settlers today. I'm continually adding to my understanding of that story and being taught new things about it. So I thank you for holding my ignorance as well as my knowledge of what is there. I'd like to start by telling you a story. So this is a fairy tale that I made up myself. Once upon a time, there was an ancient being, the Ancient One, so powerful and so great, so long ago that her name is now lost to time. But she ruled over a kingdom beyond the sea, and she was both beautiful and powerful, gracious and kind and strong all at once. And the Ancient One was so powerful, yet so kind, that she was beloved by all of her people, and soon by many, many other peoples as well. And she grew in her grace and her strength so much that the sun god and the moon goddess came to fear her. For you see, the sun god and the moon goddess ruled over all the lands, and they would brook no rivals. The sun god who was mighty, and the moon goddess who was cunning. Together, they presided over the order of things, or so they thought. So they made a plan together, the mighty sun god and the cunning moon goddess, to dethrone and disempower the Ancient One. The sun god pretended to be in love with the Ancient One, and though it's quite possible that he loved power more. And the moon goddess pretended to be the Ancient One's friend. And though it's possible that she loved power more. So the moon goddess told the Ancient One, I know that you are in love with the sun god, and it is true. The moon goddess said, I give you a vial of my tears, of the moon's tears. If you drink them when you meet the sun god, then your love will last forever. And the Ancient One was glad and grateful. So she met the sun god in her underwater kingdom beneath the sea, and she drank the vial of tears that the moon goddess had given her. But the moon goddess had lied. This, dear ones, is something called perfidy. Have you ever heard a word like that before? Instead of being a magical love potion, the moon's tears put the Ancient One to sleep. And while she was sleeping, oh yes, dear ones, the sun god tore her body apart and scattered the pieces of her body all across the world, across the many lands, in an attempt to destroy her power and her beauty forever. Have you ever heard such perfidy, dear ones? That is the meaning of this word. But fear not, for all was not lost. The Ancient One still lived, where her body parts were scattered, where her blood spilled all across the world. The animals and the plants consumed it. And then the humans came and consumed the plants and the animals, so that the spirit and the body of the Ancient One came to live on in them, the Ancient One's children. And these children were known by their unruly bodies, their love that could not be controlled or dominated, a power and a strength so incredible, a love so strong that it could shake the heavens and make the rains fall, could gather clouds, blocking out the sight of the sun and the moon. But the sun god and the moon goddess, who were mighty and cunning, would not so easily accept defeat. They told their followers, who were many, that these children of the Ancient One were demons, were depraved, were sinful, would lead their children into disrepair, disarray. And so the children of the Ancient One were hunted and haunted, pursued with dogs and with torches and with fire. And the children of the Ancient One learned many ways to survive. Some of them decided to cast off their past, their inner selves, and try their best to become just like the children of the sun god and moon goddess. And these were known as the lost. But that's a story for another time. Some of the children of the Ancient One decided that they would band together and form a secret village far away in the mountains and in the woods. And so they came together, left the lands of the sun god and moon goddess, and they built a village in what they thought, what they imagined was the Ancient One's name. They called it love, the village of love. Yes, the children of the Ancient One were the children of love. So the children of love built a village to love. They built temples to love. They wrote songs to love. They created great tomes and texts devoted to the philosophy and the words and the poetry of love, and it was beautiful. But my dear ones, you must remember, the body of the Ancient One had been torn to pieces. Yes, love's body had been torn apart. Her blood spilled across all the lands. And when the pieces of love went into her children, their bodies also absorbed not just her grace, but also her strength, not just her mercy, but also her rage, not just her forgiveness, but also her pain, her longing for vengeance. And so the children of love began to quarrel, began to fight, began to spite one another, particularly over the specifics of love. Was this poet's book better than the others? Was this temple more beautiful than the rest? Did some children of love know the word of love and the spirit of love better than the others? Some of the children of love became inflamed with rage. Everywhere they looked, they saw the sun god, mighty, and the moon goddess, cunning, planning to invade their village and tear it down, invade the hearts of the children of love and corrupt them. So they made plans, mighty and cunning plans, to dominate the village of love, each deciding that their idea was better than the others, each believing that they were closer to the ancient mother, love, than the rest. And as these quarrels grew, fights began. And as fights broke out, violence started. And when the violence began, some lost their lives. And this was too much for the village of love, dear ones. It was too much. So the children of love waged war against one another. They tore down the temples of love. They burned the books of love. They banned the songs of love. They destroyed the village of love in the name of love. They did these things. And so the village of love was lost, and the children of love were scattered once more. Yes, dear ones, it is a sad story. But fear not, for hope is not lost. You see, the children of love are still being born today. They make themselves known as queer, as trans, as different than the rest, with unruly bodies and a love so strong that it can shake the heavens and call down the rain. And yes, dear ones, our mission still stands, to reunite the body of love, to come together as a communal organism, to bring together the words and the songs, but most of all, the spirit of love, so that love might live once more. So that's my story, and I am sticking to it. If you want to make comments in the chat, that is welcome, but also it is not required. I'm Kai Cheng Thom, and I have a bio, but mostly I am a storyteller. I was that before anything else. And I tell you that story because I think it's fun to start with something fantastical and whimsical, but also sad and dramatic before like a more formal presentation or experiential, but also because it is deep to my heart. I believe that in every story and every myth, there is something true, that there is a truth in story, in fiction, that cannot be expressed in scientific terminology or formal colonial language. And for me, this truth is about my own communities, my experience of running away from home as a queer young adult and discovering a whole new world of anarchists, social justice activists, radical queers, and falling in love with the village of love. Some of you might also have run away from home. We're all running away from home at some point, right? Looking for that perfect place, the village of love. And often, if we're lucky, we find it, particularly on the internet these days, right? Like really easy to find your people, or so it seems on the internet for some of us. But then something happens, doesn't it? I think you know this story. This perfect place, this village of love, isn't quite what you thought it would be. There's something growing there. Things get messy. Things fall apart. People hurt each other. And we're not prepared for that, right? We're prepared to be hurt by our families of origin. Unfortunately, that is true for most of us. We are prepared to be hurt by the external world. Unfortunately, that is also true. We are not prepared to be harmed by the people who said they would love us, the people we found, our chosen families. But they hurt us too, because they're human, and we hurt them back because we're human. And what we do next, I think, really determines like not just the patterns of our lives, but the fates of our movements. So that's where social justice and embodied conflict resolution come in for me, is that I have seen way too many of my communities fall apart. I'm a trans woman of color. I am also a former sex worker. I like truly mean it when I say that I've lived in like anarchist communities. I don't believe in the nation state or the rule of colonial law. And that's awesome, except when you get to situations where you're like, oh my God, we're in terrible conflict and we have no frameworks for dealing with that. I've lost a lot of friends to conflict. And by lost, I mean like I lost some of those relationships and I'm still losing them. But I also mean I have friends who've taken their lives or lost their lives to interpersonal conflict. So I would like to share with you some thoughts and strategies and hopes that I've gathered as a conflict coach and mediator. I'm also a former clinical social worker, so you'll see a lot of my stuff comes from those realms. Formal conflict resolution, trauma theory, as well as sort of the more grassroots activist-based philosophies of transformative justice and restorative justice, which are largely rooted in Indigenous and Black organizing traditions here on Turtle Island, also known as North America. But before I do, I would like to invite you into a quick experiential activity. Okay, so if you are open to it, it's not required. then I invite you to quickly find yourself in like a seated posture or other meditative posture. You know, straighten the spine as best as possible, drop the chin, and let your gaze fall onto a neutral spot, or let the eyes close. And let in your breath, just noticing it, not needing to change it. So I invite you to imagine that aliens have circled the orbit of our planet and bombarded us with like a magical alien ray. And this magical alien ray has erased the notion of punishment from our collective consciousness. We no longer know what punishment is. We no longer desire to do it or have any like ability to enact punishment. All of our systems that are punitive have been erased and replaced with something else. And I invite you just to notice what happens in your body as I make this invitation. You don't have to actually be able to envision this. This is more an inquiry into what your body feels as I'm saying the words, like shining a flashlight on your thoughts, feelings, sensations, embodied story around punishment. So there's a world without punishment. We're imagining that you were asleep while these alien rays bombarded us, so you wake up. How do you know that the world is different? And I guide this inquiry by inviting you to think first, what's just different about you in your body now that there's no more punishment? You can't punish others, but you can also not be punished. And then I invite you to think about your close relationships, the people in your life who you see every day. How are those relationships different in this world without punishment? And then I invite you to expand the aperture of your awareness to your local community, the schools and workplaces, community centers that you attend. How are those different? How is work, how is school different when punishment isn't part of them? Do you like that? Do you dislike it? Is it a bit of both? You're not sure. And then I invite you to expand your awareness. I know we're moving quickly here, to the country, nation state you are in. How is that different in a world without punishment? How are its borders different? Its military different? Its taxation collection systems different? Its disciplinary or quote correctional systems different? Expanding a bit further now to the entire world. Yeah, just a bit further. How is that different in this world without punishment? The ways that people relate to one another, whole peoples, right? Groups, indigenous and settler, migrant and non-migrant, whatever that means. Powerful, privileged, oppressed, minoritized, marginalized. I invite you to take a few more breaths here in this world without punishment. And then on this next breath, to let it go. Bringing a little movement and love to your body, whatever it was feeling during that exercise, and returning to our shared space. So I normally like to do that meditation much more slowly, but we are of limited time today. And Karina and I were just laughing about the amount of material I try to pack into these presentations. Because I'm obsessed with conflict, and I could talk literally for a month without stopping about it. So if you want to book me for a month of nonstop talking, then my bank account welcomes you. Said the so-called anarchist. So I would invite you just to, yes, I see as the people are already doing, type your initial thoughts, feelings, sensations, emotions into the chat. And if your thoughts, feelings, sensations, emotions were like, that was bad, I did not like it, that is also welcome. Or if they were like, that was impossible, I didn't do it, I could not, I also welcome that. I am seeing right now, people are typing light, joy, spaciousness, curiousness, no toxic guilt or shame, sense of freedom, curious, intriguing. Yeah, I welcome all of this, relief, softness, expanding. So hold on to this embodied feeling. And anxious, yeah, welcome to the anxiousness. So I do this activity, I've been doing this meditation for a year, ever since the tour for my book, I Hope We Choose Love, which explores some of this stuff, but not all of it. It's more a personal reflection than like strategic or like embodied action. And lots of people say relief, but lots of people also say anxiety, shame, fear. How would I be safe? And I just want to point out two quick things. Normally we'd spend a lot more time unpacking this, but what generally comes up is people either feel freed and released, or they feel fear, shame, anxiety, or a combination of the two in response to imagining a world without punishment. And my take on that, and you of course are welcome to have your own take and share it in the chat, is that punishment is deeply embedded into the dominant culture of colonial society. And I think it is also deeply embedded in many cultures and societies. Like I come from, well, I come from Vancouver, Canada, but I am Chinese by descent. And was raised, in some ways very traditionally, and there's a lot of punishment in there. Don't know if that's colonial or indigenous to my Chinese heritage, but I suspect both. We believe that punishment protects us, and that's actually enshrined in law and jurisprudence in the colonial world and also other parts of the world, that we do punishment like fines and jail, and in some case corporal punishment or the death penalty. We do those things, there's a real philosophy that's very well documented behind them, because we believe that they will A, deter others from doing so. So if we watch other people get punished, we will not do the bad action that was punishable. Quote, bad action, we'll revisit that in a second. And if we are the person who deserves punishment, then there's this idea that punishment will change us. Punishment as pedagogical tool, that the pain that is visited upon the punished party will somehow cleanse them of the wrongness or badness that led them to do the harm, supposed harm, that they committed in the first place. And then there's a little bit of like eye for an eye to this, right? Like, and this is very ancient. The idea that if someone has done harm, then justice is served, something like if there's an equilibrium that is righted, a disequilibrium that is righted by visiting harm upon someone who has done harm. An eye for an eye, that's very old. Yes, so these are kind of our three ideas about punishment that I can distill. And I would just invite us to consider if we think that's true or not. Like, does that actually work? Does punishment stop people from doing things that are harmful? Does punishment change people who have harmed into better people? And does punishment create a sense of justice in the world? Some of you are like, maybe yes. And some of you are like, maybe no. And some of you are like, it's nuanced. There's something in between. And I'm not here to tell you what decision to make about that. I would invite us actually to keep all the doors open because it is extremely complex. What I will also invite us to explore, though, is that, and this is what I'm about to say next comes from the lineage of transformative justice thought. So prison abolitionist and police abolitionist thought as well. This is really championed by Black and racialized queer femmes and women thinkers, including Leah Lakshmi, Piapsara Senha, Miriam Kaba, and Shira Hassan, Ejeris Dixon, Mia Mingus, Adrienne Marie Brown, Loretta Ross, and many others. Most of these people I'm naming are women and femmes from the United States of America, just to say and name that where that's coming from. These thinkers have brought to us some really powerful reflections on, well, sure, maybe we can philosophically debate whether punishment does the things that I just said it did. And I see someone has asked about punishment as a tool to make examples. Yeah, so again, this kind of relates to the idea of if we watch people get punished, then we won't do bad things. And I'm about to question this idea of bad things. So does punishment actually land on the people who do, quote, bad things? Is a really, really important question. And trans woman writer and video game maker, Porpentine Charity Hardscape, actually writes that punishment doesn't do that. Punishment She writes that punishment is something that the powerful do to the less powerful or powerless. And if you look at the way that politics and like social capital move in our world, I think that really gets borne out in some really interesting ways, particularly if we take a contemporary example of Donald Trump, right? Who is getting punished in relation to Donald Trump's regime? Is it Donald? Maybe, maybe not. I think not. So the punishment happens to people who cannot stop it from happening. Porpentine also writes that punishment is a laundering of pain, not a rebalancing of the scales. So why really do we punish? Maybe not for those 3 reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, but maybe it's because we're trying to release our pain, right? So this relates maybe to the ancient ritual idea of scapegoating in some way. Who carries the pain in our society? The people who cannot stop it from happening. And when we look at the demographics and statistics around imprisonment and police brutality and the death penalty particularly, at least in the context of Turtle Island, which is what I can speak to, right? Turtle Island, North America. It is not the powerful people who are responsible for some of the mass atrocities that are currently ongoing who are getting punished. It is people of color, particularly Black, Indigenous, and brown poor folks. Also queer people disproportionately represented in prisons, trans people, sex workers, other marginalized folks. And that to me is like the most sobering piece of what I just said. And that's not my thought. It comes again from abolitionist thought, transformative justice thought, like way older and way bigger than me, but really, really intense. And I think we can follow that logic into who gets healthcare and who gets punitive healthcare, right? Who is punished in schools, who is singled out for psychological care, for example, versus disciplinary action. Again, the statistics of research in these areas bear out that it is the marginalized, people of color, queer people who get punished. So even if we were to argue that punishment philosophically has some merit to it, which again, I leave the door open to that, though it's not what I personally believe, we can definitely notice on a hard and fast level that that is not what punishment is doing, at least like on the ground. Punishment is happening to people who can't stop it from happening. And then, we can go deeper into abolitionist thought, and we can see that actually it's quite a lot of innocent people who are being grievously harmed by a system based on punishment and domination. So why is it hard for us to give up punishment then? I would argue because punishment is a tool of the powerful. But it's a tool of the powerful that we've absorbed. Like we're really into punishment, hey? I have punishment fantasies all the time. Like I just think about revenge. I wrote a whole novel that is just about a gang of trans women who beat up straight guys for fun. And it's delicious. I love my novel. And by the way, so did Emma Watson. This is my one claim to fame. I didn't come here to brag though. So, okay, so punishment, right? Okay, so we have fantasies, it's delicious. Why is it delicious? Because there's something in us that is angry, right? There's something in us that loves power. There's something in us that likes stuff. People are asking for the title of the novel. You can look it up on Google. I will now go into a bit of an embodied framework around this, okay? So embodiment. Those of you who are here, I think might already be somewhat involved in the embodiment world, like knowing about the nervous system and trauma theory. So I will move quickly over this, but I will try and spend enough time. So this is my re-rendering, not so good re-rendering, of Pat Ogden and Dan Siegel's window of tolerance model. This is a model that is meant to show us the action of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system branches in response to stress and trauma. And really on a basic level, I cannot explain this as well as the true experts in this realm. The window of tolerance theory, important to remember that it is based on polyphagal theory, which is not a hard science, it's just a pet peeve of mine. The window of tolerance is this idea that at a certain level of nervous system activation, we have an optimal-ish level of arousal. So that's the amount of energy moving through our nervous system, like literal physical energy that's being activated. And in this window of tolerance, we're responding to stress, including pleasurable stress, by going up and down, right? I'm taking a nap, my parasympathetic system kicks in, I'm not engaged sympathetically so much. And if I'm playing a fun game of tag, which I haven't done in years, then my sympathetic nervous system kicks in and I'm going up. That's all within the window of tolerance. Within our window of tolerance, we're able to be relational. That's a key distinguishing factor, that in our window of, quote, tolerance, some people have said the window of acceptance as well, because tolerance can be a tricky word. We are able to relate and be curious with one another in a non-anxious way, emphasis non-anxious way. We are also able to kind of think from the prefrontal cortex integrated with, the hindbrain, other parts of our bodies and nervous systems. We can integrate emotion and executive functioning. That's my very sort of basic description of window tolerance. But when we face what the body perceives as a level of life-threatening stress, we might rise out of our window of tolerance. So that's the sympathetic nervous system, pushing us up into an elevated state where our hearts are racing, where our breath is fast, and where we're feeling those emotional states of panic and rage. These panic and rage being attached to the fight and flight survival responses, which make it very difficult to be relational, especially in a non-anxious way. In fight or flight, we might be trying to run or get away from the source of what we perceive to be life-threatening stress, or we might be trying to destroy it. And then at a certain level of stress, the nervous system might actually transition out of fight or flight, hyperarousal, lock, and kind of get the parasympathetic nervous system involved, and then we might dive into hypoarousal, which in a stress state is sort of that place of having one foot on the gas pedal, one foot on the brakes, is how I recently heard Linda Tai describe it, I think, and it was a really good description. So we're still actually feeling danger and life stress, but the parasympathetic branch has become dominant. And the survival response to that is sort of a collapsed state or a submit state, or perhaps if there's more sympathetic arousal, like a tight, frozen state. And in hypoarousal, we are more likely to feel the emotion states of numbness, depression, boredom, I've given up, whatever you say, deep shame as well, which Janina Fisher describes as more as a physiological mechanism rather than an emotion. Shame being meant to keep us small and submissive to others in an attempt to appease them and so make the danger go away, or make us less visible to the presence of danger. So that's important to know. This model is one around which many, many schools of embodiment, particularly embodied psychotherapy and other forms of relationality, are based. This idea that we want to be in the window of tolerance in order to experience life without constant fear or panic,